When Tomb Raider released in 1996, it set brand new standards on how 3D action games should be perceived. Core Design worked on the new IP for 2 years. They tried extremely hard to make a fully 3-dimensional platforming type adventure game, starring a female role, which at the time was unprecedented. In Tomb Raider, you play as Lara Croft, who was later in development renamed Lara Croft. She was to be the female James Bond, brave, British and beautiful. In the game, Lara is hired by Natla Technologies to find and locate 3 pieces of an ancient artifact of unknown power called the Scion. Throughout her adventure, Lara will be travelling to Greece, to Egypt, and even the sunken city of Atlantis. You'll face a variety of creatures, from wolves to prehistoric dinosaurs. The task of each level is to guide Lara through various environments, from crevices, colosseums, and of course plenty of tombs. Getting around the levels, you'll have an assortment of platforms to jump to and puzzles to solve. The animations in Tomb Raider were astonishing for the time, and Core Design used the full power of the PlayStation to make sure Lara moved and looked her best from every angle. Whether she was sliding down a slope or climbing up a tall mountain wall. The game will feature many puzzles throughout your playthrough to keep you constantly thinking and involved in every moment. You'll need to explore your surroundings to find not only keys but other objects such as ammunition and medkits. Lara has a fairly good assortment of weapons at her disposal. Her iconic dual pistols feature unlimited ammunition and are the main weapons of choice. However, you'll also find various other weapons in your adventure such as a shotgun, machine gun and more, which will require to be fed ammo drops you find lying around the levels. The sound design in Tomb Raider is perfect and adds a whole new layer of depth to the large explorative levels which you'll get lost within. The sound of bats echoing in caves or Lara's own footsteps makes every moment even more eerily riveting. The graphics in Tomb Raider, on the other hand, haven't aged nearly as well. The textures are very clunky and pixelated, and this becomes a problem when many necessary objects or medkits and ammo are too difficult to see within the environment. This of course would be something future Tomb Raider games would get right. Overall, there is little for me to say that hasn't been said before. Tomb Raider is a perfect example of one of the first fully 3D action games getting it right. Core Design did an amazing job, delivering an outstanding adventure, filled with tons of puzzle solving, action and platforming. A brilliant soundtrack, some amazingly well implemented levels, and one of the most memorable tutorial levels in her mansion. And of course, who can forget that it also brought out one of the most iconic female video game protagonists to date. Thanks all for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios, take care. The success of the first Tomb Raider catapulted Lara Croft into a household name. She was plastered over covers of magazines, all over adverts. She became one of the most recognisable video game characters of the time, and for the first time she became a popular game character that wasn't just seen as a children's mascot by the general public. Video games had finally smashed through that barrier of being seen as toys into now its own medium of entertainment, and it was Lara Croft at the forefront of this. But with any successful video game in this industry, a quick follow-up sequel was inevitable. It would have felt like a waste of a license to not capitalise on more Tomb Raider projects. But let's say Eidos Interactive, the owners of the Tomb Raider IP at the time, got a little too greedy. They wanted a new Tomb Raider game every single year. So 1 year after the first game, Core Design quickly cobbled together the follow-up Tomb Raider 2. We kick off Tomb Raider 2 with a cutscene showcasing an ancient war in China. One of the armies wields a powerful dragon, but when a dagger buried into the dragon's chest is pulled out from the beast, it quickly dies. This mythical dagger of Cheyenne is kept locked away inside the Great Wall of China for hundreds of years. Of course, this dangerous, mystical artifact has piqued the interest of Miss Croft. She goes out looking for the dagger but finds only a trap. It seems the leader of a cult obsessed with the lore surrounding the dagger, Marco Bartoli, got to the site of the dagger first. Thus, as Lara Croft, you'll travel the globe, from Venice, Italy to Tibet, and then back to China to reclaim the dagger before it's used for ill intentions. Tomb Raider 2 is a much bigger game than the previous entry, but oftentimes not for the best reasons. In its level design, it's certainly broader in scope, with you now able to access one of two vehicles throughout the game. With this larger scope came a fantastic new slate of locations you'll be travelling to. There's less underground levels here in favour of temples, the streets of Venice, and the mountains of Tibet. However, in saying that, 2 managed to have more levels that I hated than the first game. More specifically the rig level, the underwater 40 fathoms level, and the slow progression of the Maria Doria level. So tiresome and devoid of fun, I had to take multiple breaks playing Tomb Raider 2 just so I didn't give up around the midsection. Thankfully, the game retains the enjoyable Croft Manor tutorial style level, but expands it significantly, and this ends up being another great place to go to when the main game frustrates you too much, just like the original game. Now you even have a butler following you around everywhere you go, but the game lets you lock him up in the freezer if you choose to do so. But the other issue I have with Tomb Raider 2 is the difficulty curve is a lot steeper than the first game. The first level starts off with a tiger and a lot of traps straight out of the gate, and the game only gets tougher. I remember dying a lot more times in the sequel despite being more confident with the controls. It's like this game doesn't want you to win. It can be relentless sometimes. Like, I don't want an easy ride, Lara, but give me something here at least. On the plus side, Lara's arsenal of moves has expanded slightly to incorporate her quick turn in mid-air and also underwater, making the aged control scheme a little easier to get a handle on. The save feature was also altered. No longer have you got to find these one-use save crystals like in the first game, but it has now changed to you being able to manually save at any point you choose from within the pause menu. Tomb Raider 2's enemy variety unfortunately does take a dip with this installment, and I personally felt it much more authentic how there was only a couple of human enemies in the first game. 2 is littered with them, Frustrating, bullet sponge hit scan enemies with next to zero AI make up the majority of 2's common foes. They are placed in sometimes hard to see areas and you'll be puzzled why your health is just dropping. For me, this was the biggest disappointment of this sequel, but I can kind of see why Core Design decided on adding so many human foes, as for the time I can see this maybe as being a way of expanding the first game's adventure, and as a way of putting to use Lara's larger array of weapons this time around, as she now has new access to an automatic pistols, a harpoon gun, a grenade launcher, and an M16 rifle. In the graphics department, Tomb Raider 2 got a neat upgrade over the first to say it released only 1 year after. Lara's ponytail got some new physics and its own individual free-flowing movement, which was a huge leap forward from the first game. Lara's polygonal chest and limbs got smoother, a few more curves, and was given a new costumes that she changes into over the course of the game depending on the environment of the level. And 2 came with some new dynamic lighting effects to boot. After chasing down the dagger and battling the dragon form of Marco Bartoli, the Temple of Cheyenne is destroyed and the dagger is Lara's. However, in a neat little epilogue level set back at Croft Manor, the final few of Bartoli's men arrive hoping to assassinate Lara. But ultimately they fail once again, of course. Ultimately, Tomb Raider 2 I don't see as highly as I do the original game. Yes, Lara returned with some highly needed improvements for her character model, the save system was refined and simplified, the lighting got an overhaul, and her moveset added more quick turn options to help with her dated controls. However, these felt like minor improvements for a game that mostly feels like more of the same, but lacking that excitement, adventure sensation, and the thrill of isolation you get from the first game's levels and environments. The harsh difficulty, tiresome drawn out middle section, and over-reliance on bullet sponge human enemies outdates Tomb Raider 2 more than the original for me. These annual deadlines weren't going to be slowing down anytime soon, as Tomb Raider 2 was yet another bestseller for the time, and thus a third game was quickly in the works. I'll catch you all in the next Croft adventure where we'll take a look at Tomb Raider 3.
Don't you think you've seen enough? Hi, I'm Lara Croft, and I'm here to tell you all about my new game, Tomb Raider 3.
The hype for the next Tomb Raider adventure was real. Eidos Interactive poured everything into the marketing of the third Tomb Raider game, and around the end of 1998, Lara Croft was back for her annual appearance. This time around, Core Design wanted to hold back on the action side and focus deeper on the graphics and detail of the game. Tomb Raider 3 was built primarily for the PlayStation 1. This allowed Core Design to work on their engine and tweak it in multiple ways. They incorporated the use of triangular polygons, which allowed them to create more complex architectures and realistic feeling environments. No longer will you see levels built on a square-based grid system. The updated engine also had even further improved lighting, which added reflections to water, and there were some weather effects like snowfall added to certain levels to add to the atmosphere of the game. The story is another of your find the ancient powerful artifact. A meteorite crash-landed in Antarctica thousands of years ago. Within it were 5 artifacts that grant their user ultimate power. As Lara, you then travel the globe in search of these artifacts. But while the narrative isn't the most in-depth, it still plays well into Tomb Raider 3's new innovation for the series, being able to choose which artifact you go for next. The game always starts you in the jungles of India and ends in the lands of Antarctica, but in the middle of the game you can choose between the Area 51 facility in Nevada, museums of London, and villages in the South Pacific. It's definitely a great way of expanding Lara's adventure even further than the previous two games, here letting you pick on a globe where you want to travel to, really feeling like you've been put into the shoes of Lara herself. But like with Core Design's Tomb Raider entries, they get one thing right and another issue sprouts in its place. While you get to pick which chapter you'd like to do next, it's advised that you don't pick Area 51 last. This is because a level in this chapter sees you taken captive and you're removed of all your weapons and inventory with no way of getting them back, pretty much handicapping yourself if you pick Nevada last. Tomb Raider 3 is your traditional Croft escape that you come to expect at this point. She can climb walls, swing on ropes, engage in combat with endangered wildlife. You know what's in store. Lara does have the ability to sprint now, making getting through these larger levels much quicker. The levels in Tomb Raider 3 are even more expansive than those in the second game, this time allowing you to take more than one route around some of the levels, which certainly increased the replay value. That being said, Tomb Raider 3 had more vehicle sections, but instead of improving them from the second game, 3 just dumps more on top of you and tells you to deal with it. An awful quad bike section in which it's easier to crash and burn more than it is to stay on the path, and the kayak section which it feels like there's two of you fighting over control of it. Area 51 stage does attempt at adding some stealth features, but Lara's moveset and the enemy intelligence just doesn't lend well to this. Thankfully there was a higher variation of enemies than in the second game, and the dreaded ranged enemies are used more sparingly. Unfortunately, Core Design even managed to let the ball down here too, by introducing a poison mechanic, which some people don't mind. Personally, I wasn't a big fan of it. See, some enemies can poison you, in which your health will continuously drop until you're dead, unless you waste a medkit to take it away. Even if you've been poisoned on full health, throw a medkit away to get rid of the poisoning, then another enemy poisons you straight after, you've then got to use a second medkit, and this game isn't exactly giving them away. Another uncommon item you'll be picking up in this game is the return of the save crystals. The one great part that Tomb Raider 2 fixed, the pause menu save system, is once again vanquished. The crystals are back. Who exactly were Core Design trying to please? Neo Cortex?
Crystals.
But instead of being forced to make a save where you pick up the crystal like in the original game, you can carry them in your inventory. But still you're challenged by only being able to save a limited amount of times, which in an already challenging Tomb Raider game just makes it all the more frustrating. Life getting too stressful? Then not to worry, because from the main menu you can revisit Lara Croft's Manor Retreat. Yes, Lara's Manor is back, and with further advancements, having a larger gardens area, more rooms, activities, a training area, and an aquarium. It still poses as a great place to go to and wind down after the intensity of the main game. You've collected the 5 artifacts of the meteorite and took them back to your doctor friend in Antarctica. Well, obviously it's a trap. Good Doctor now has all the pieces he needs and he turns into the Scorpion King. Dwayne Johnson, eat your heart out. It's actually not a fun final boss. Annoyingly, he has one-hit kill attack, and you have such a small window of opportunity to defeat him. You escape the collapsing temple, and just as you're about to climb into a helicopter, the game brings up the end card and rolls credits. It's obvious they were running out of time here. Tomb Raider 3 is yet another tough-as-nails, globe-trotting adventure. It's the most beautiful game in the franchise yet, and has a fun level select option, complemented with new advancements in the level architecture, level variety, and an expanded Croft Manor. However, for me, it still doesn't reach the height of the original game. You can almost taste how rushed that this game was, from its thrown together difficulty, its untested poison mechanic, and Area 51 inventory clear-out, even lacking an endgame cutscene. While it may have some more improvements, the cons outweigh the pros for me, resulting in just yet another Lara Croft adventure. Tomb Raider 3 was yet another financial success, and Tomb Raider 4 was quickly put into the works. Even her own makers, Core Design, were kinda getting sick of her at this point. Let's hope they don't kill her off in the next installment. Lara Croft is back, just 1 year after Tomb Raider 3. Core Design was back out with another annual Tomb Raider release. This is Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation. Following Eidos Interactive's strict annual release schedule of Tomb Raider games, the team at Core Design was getting a bit tired of the same formula and character, not given any time for them to grow the series into something more. With this, the team decided this was to be the last game. They would write off her finale and call it a day, with them hoping to move on to different projects. Well, when you've got a greedy publisher overhead, things don't always work out. The Last Revelation is set entirely in Egypt and follows another Lara Croft adventure in which she accidentally awakes Set, the ancient Egyptian god of chaos, and thus must retrieve the amulet and armour of Horus in order to vanquish Set. Alongside this war of gods, we have a very slim introduction of one of Lara's heavily accented mentors, Werner von Croy. In a flashback opening in the beginning, we see a young Lara Croft adventuring with von Croy, but upon von Croy activating a trap, Lara had to escape the tombs without him. When he comes back in the present day, he's out to stop Lara from obtaining the treasures she needs to summon Horus. Personally, I think it's great that Core Design has managed to come up with some sort of plot in such a short time period given to make the game, but I still don't find it as appealing as the simple story found in the first Tomb Raider. In the flashback, which is trying to convey to us why von Croy is going to be against us for the rest of the game, it just doesn't do a good job of this. Von Croy is a boastful idiot. He decides to take an ancient artifact in a tomb full of traps without precaution, and in doing so he gets caught inside the tomb while his student, a young Lara Croft, just barely escapes with her life. Then we go back to modern day, in which Werner von Croy somehow miraculously escaped the tomb and now has a vendetta against Lara. For what exactly? Saving her life? Meanwhile, Lara herself in present times carelessly takes a sacred amulet which brings about the apocalypse. All for what exactly?
I'm sorry, I only play for sport.
Oh well, then it's all justified. Did she not learn anything from von Croy?
Ah, ancient hocus pocus. Forget this nonsense and come over here.
Core Design's fatigue of the character and franchise was certainly beginning to show here, as they just rushed a plot together quickly to try and kill her off.
I am the renowned archaeologist adventurer Werner von Croy.
Core Design decided to scrap Tomb Raider 3's globe level select feature and just go back to a level-to-level structure with new hub areas. With the little development time that they had, they primarily focused on the graphics once more. Lara looked the smoothest she ever had at the time, getting rid of the polygonal joints. These were higher levels of detail within the environments as well. Geometry and lighting added depth and personality to Egypt. They did develop a new rope swinging mechanic, but it doesn't really feel the most fleshed out, with stiff controls and a very unhelpful camera. The last revelation was the longest Tomb Raider in the series, around 18 hours-ish, yet felt like forever, and I don't say that lightly. I know there's a few fans of this game, you may have strong nostalgia for it, but personally I just didn't enjoy this one as much as the first game. I loved that this game had so much Egyptian influence in its level design, as I am a massive fan of ancient Egyptian culture as it is, and this game got me really excited. I loved the cold tombs enlightened with the heat of a sizzling torch and littered with lots of death traps, classic Tomb Raider style, and the brilliant Egyptian themed music in the background. But even my interest in the game's setting still wasn't enough to dampen the flames of tediousness with this game. It's really obscure puzzles that involve a new crafting system, backtracking to previous areas to find missing pieces of the puzzle. Its ginormous amount of 30 plus levels, almost double the size of the third game. The pace becomes drier and drier and feels more stretched out the further that you play. And the worst part is, there's no Croft Manor to be found. I scoured this game inside and out, no Croft Manor to go to and explore in between frustrating segments within the game. And with the long length of this one, this was a sad discovery. So you've travelled across Egypt and trapped Set underneath the pyramid. As the tomb you're in begins to crumble, Lara makes a quick escape towards the nearest exit. However, when she's close to being free, Werner von Croy arrives. He offers his hand, but Lara refuses, becoming entombed beneath Egypt herself. This being Core Design's way of ironically tying up her story and calling it a day.
No more Set?
No time. Your hand, Lara. Give me your hand. Take my hand. I can pull you to safety.
Good to see you again, Werner.
I couldn't leave you.
Tomb Raider The Last Revelation is a tough game for me to score because on one hand, this is another Lara Croft adventure with stunning scenery, a detailed Egyptian world, getting to scale a great pyramid, and more brilliant music accompanying the game. I specifically loved the train mission. It's safe to say I enjoyed my time here more than with Tomb Raider 2 and 3. But only slightly, as again my time was plagued with really obscure puzzle designs, laborious backtracking, and such a long length with not much in terms of variety as the previous installments. I'm going to give it a good 7 out of 10. To say the developers were tired of her at this point, they still poured some passion into this project. Just maybe could have cut a few levels towards the latter end, and had they had more time, I know that there'd be a stronger set of characters and plot here. Well, where do we go from here? Lara Croft is dead, and... what? She's not dead. Oh no, she is dead. What do you mean it's unaware? There was another game the following year? Well, I guess the Tomb Raider cow hadn't fully been beaten by Eidos Interactive just yet. I'll see you in the next video when we cover Tomb Raider 5, Chronicles. In 1996, the publishers of the IP at the time, Eidos Interactive, were hesitant to crank a new game out every single year after. The team had grown fatigued. with the character and series because of this, and thus attempted to end Lara's story in the last revelation, where she presumably gets buried alive. But with core design not decapitating her, they set themselves up for yet more installments.
You should have gone for the head.
Eidos Interactive pressured core design to continue the series further, beating a horse that was well and truly dead. This resulted in Tomb Raider Chronicles being released 1 year after Tomb Raider The Last Revelation in 2000, the 5th game in the series. And in an interview with the designer Andy Sanham, he stated that the staff created the game to earn a living rather than having any passion for it. Is it as poor as he remembers it being? This was my first time playing Chronicles, so let's take a look. So Chronicles takes place after The Last Revelation. It acknowledges Lara's presumed death and has her butler Winston and a few of her friends gather around and tell stories of her other adventures that we hadn't yet seen. This is the whole setup for Chronicles. It's less of a big adventure and more just levels showcasing bite-sized side missions that Lara went on throughout her lifetime. There's 4 stories told throughout the game. The first finds you in Rome, as Lara is in search of the Philosopher's Stone. This chapter had a very classic Tomb Raider feel, lots of puzzles, platforming, gunfights, and Lara donning her usual attire. If it was a whole nother game of this, it would have gotten very tiresome incredibly fast. Thankfully the chapter doesn't last too long. The second chapter has you infiltrate a Russian submarine in search of the Spear of Destiny. Lara is sporting new camouflage, and this section brings in the stealth elements that were last seen in Tomb Raider 3. It also has a neat underwater section and a really creative escape from the sinking ship, especially when some wires electrocute the water, an intense section which is a fitting end to the Russian chapter. The next chapter is centred around an adventure when Lara was a lot younger. She sneaks aboard a boat travelling to these creepy paranormal isles to see if local rumours are true about the place having ghosts. It's a very isolated set of levels and Lara is completely unarmed. It's definitely the most far from what we've experienced before in the series. Lara will eventually craft a slingshot to aid in some puzzles, but overall this was a fantastic chapter. Silent Hill meets Tomb Raider. The mysterious Gothic Isles chapter is unlike anything that has come in the series so far. It had an eerie horror vibe to it, and I felt it fit well in adding atmosphere and a new tone to the overall series. The final chapter sees Lara infiltrate Von Croy Industries for an artifact called the Iris, which we last saw at the beginning of The Last Revelation. She glides in with her new Black Cat stealth suit, but wields only a new submachine gun, leaving behind her trusty dual sidearms. The problem here is for the first time in Tomb Raider history, you can completely run out of ammo and be defenseless. While it has some brilliant moments, stealthily taking out guards, climbing up this huge skyscraper, like many of these core design entries, it's full of questionable objectives, like a shooting range, which is really difficult even without the PS1 super sensitive aiming controls, and this is mandatory to progress. If you fail, Lara gets gassed. Core design really wanted her dead, didn't they? Well, Eidos didn't, and at the very end of the game we go back to present day as Von Croy and his search team discovers Lara's backpack, hinting at yet more Tomb Raider.
Pass it to me. We've found her.
Chronicles at the time of its release received mixed reception from critics, saying the team had ran out of ideas. I can't agree too much with that statement, but I can see why it got received so poorly compared to the previous games. While Chronicles had 4 different takes on the Tomb Raider adventure for the player to experience, the production quality had certainly dropped. Chronicles saw no major improvements in the graphics or environment designs. In fact, the environments looked worse than some previous installments. It was clear core design was cutting corners to meet those yearly deadlines, what with missing cutscenes between levels or really poor quality backgrounds and skyboxes. There was also no improvements to the aging controls, the rope swinging, the obscure puzzles, and then the finicky aiming and clunky stealth which returned from Tomb Raider 3. Tomb Raider Chronicles was supposed to be the redemption of Lara after the last Revelation's fairly disappointing story, but it was far the worthy send-off that she needed. While I really enjoyed the 4 bite-sized narratives of past adventures in Lara's career, Chronicles just lacked that wow factor that the previous games had delivered. It felt like a watered down escapade for fan mods built using a level editor rather than an official Tomb Raider entry. Chronicles is an often frustrating but rather competent entry that just didn't need to exist. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10 as I can get some enjoyment out of this entry but can't see why Eidos needed to have it made, besides for money. Thankfully core design was in need of a break and that's what they got. It would be 3 more years until the next Tomb Raider released, the last game from the developer, Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness.